Timely discussion this time of year as we're headed into the holidays, and we've brought in some familiar friends that we've had on the show before. Tonight we are joined in the studio by Dalton Blazek,
Yes, sir.
all right, Director of Wilderness and Experiential,
Yes, sir.
and also a pastor, and he works over at Hidden Oaks,
Yes. Yes, sir.
and a plethora of experience with addictions and recovery.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hands-on experience, first-hand experience, been there, seen it, lived it myself. So
Yeah. And we have Dr. LaFonya Jones-Hines back in the house. And
Hello.
Dr. Jones-Hines is the author of Addiction Hurts Everyone, and she runs a private practice here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area called Balance Beacon.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are located in Euless, Texas, 345 West Parkway, Suite 200, 214-396-6503.
Yeah, perfect. So we're going to get into the discussion around just the family disease of addiction tonight, and especially around the holidays. I think it's a timely discussion, but in your guys' respective practices throughout the week, so you're at a treatment center and you're running a private practice. Mm-hmm. As we approach Thanksgiving, as we're getting closer to Christmas, what are some of the ways you guys are kind of just noticing that this conversation is bubbling up to the surface, whether you're noticing it on social media or just at your centers respectively?
well, at our center, a lot of people start to get, a lot of our clientele starts to get kind of itchy around this time, and a little worried or anxious about what they're missing out on. There's some people that they get sent to rehab by their family, so they're not home during the holidays to make a big stink out of everything. But definitely some stress as the holidays start to come around, because clients are missing their loved ones or their friends, or just kind of upset about where life's taking them.
Yeah. That was one of the things when I was young as a clinician working in treatment centers. I had never stopped to think about until I was in those settings that, for the people even that I had loved in my life who struggled with addictions, that like when they're over there isolated away, the amount of support just across the board that the family is going to need, all right, in that separation and in those struggles that occur when a loved one goes into treatment around the holidays. It's
For some family members, it's a relief because they don't have to create. Well, they probably don't know it's a plan, but they don't. They don't know. They have to create the plan to, like, okay, so if they show up, intoxicated, or if they get too inebriated, or if they, so what excuse am I going to make? How am I going to be able to, figure out how to get them home? Or, they don't have to do all of that planning. But during this time, that's one of the things that I do work with family members on, is creating the plan of your exit strategy and your safety strategy. Right. Because a lot of times they don't know what to do. They don't know what's acceptable. They don't know what boundary to put in place. They don't know that they can drive two separate cars. Yeah. They don't realize that that's a thing. We can take two cars. Yeah. And they don't realize that they can just leave them. If you don't want to be embarrassed, if you don't want to watch them go down, continue to go further down into their addiction, leave. And it's almost like once you give them permission to do it, then it's like that light bulb comes on, like, why didn't I ever do that before? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. And here's what I love about this discussion tonight with you both in the room is you work predominantly with the friends and family members of alcoholics, and you are boots on the ground working with the addicts in treatment. And so as we go, we can just see how that discussion unfolds so that the viewers can see this is a holistic treatment that we're always trying to achieve with recovery, and everyone's affected. All right. So, maybe what we can start with is in our respective ways, maybe describe a little bit for those who maybe don't have any idea of just the addiction process. And then we can come over here and you can explain like what's going on for the family member.
Okay.
Yeah.
The addiction process itself or the rehab part of it.
Why don't we start a little bit with like kind of some of the key factors that somebody might be struggling with in addiction, like around the obsessions, compulsions, and leading into recovery.
So if you're drinking or drugging is having any negative effects on your life, but the consequences aren't enough for you to change, you need to look at yourself and evaluate whether you have a problem or not. If you're getting hit with negative consequences, bad consequences, but you're like, oh, it's going to be all right. You mentioned isolation earlier. When you find yourself isolating, not just having a beer at dinner, not just having wine with your wife, but when you start isolating and drinking, or finding a reason to leave the house, finding a reason to get away from the kids, get away from the family so you can go do what you need to do, and it just takes over your life, and it becomes something. You're missing work, you're leaving work early. Most people, by the time they come see me, they ain't got a job anymore because it's just taking control of every part of their life.
Yeah.
May I add something?
Absolutely.
So one of the examples that I give to like my male clients that are dealing or struggling with some sort of addiction, specifically alcohol and or drugs, I ask them, if someone were to break in your house and you were inebriated or intoxicated, would you be able to protect your family? And of course,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
yes. And they always say that. That's exactly what they say. That's a good question. And I don't think I can.
Right.
So, sir, go to rehab.
Yeah.
Because even coming to see me in a private practice and they're still active in their addiction, I don't usually see people still active in their addiction because we already know detoxing can be dangerous. So I tell them you at least need to go to rehab in order for you to get some sort of medical assistance to detox, just in case. And they always say, well, I've detoxed and, did all of this at home before. We don't know which time. We don't know which time. I don't know how much you've been using. I don't know what you've been using. You need to go to rehab because I don't want that on my conscience or my hands, or I don't want that to be said that I didn't tell you you need to go to treatment.
Yeah.
So I always encourage.
Yeah. Yeah, because detoxing at home can be so dangerous, especially with things like alcohol or heroin or fentanyl, things like that. Go DT, seizures, all that stuff. So that's why there's different levels of care in our profession, because somebody in active use, it's hard for them to just go see somebody at an office and then get in the car and drive past the liquor store on their way home. They got to sometimes they need to be in that kind of secluded, safe bubble where we're shielding them from the temptation. Now, when they get out, they got to go back to those places. Some people can't just pick up and move across country to a sober living. So they got to go back to their apartment and drive past that liquor store, drive past the drug house every day. And hopefully, by the time they have to do that, they have 30, 60, 90 days sober where they've, built up a toolbox and they're ready to deal with that type of stuff.
Which is also where we come in play, because after they finish in treatment, then we suggest they have a continuing care plan, which should include people like myself and Alan, for them to have scheduled weekly sessions. And we can also continue on that path of them using their toolbox, if they don't have one, to create one, and begin to use those tools in their toolbox so that when they do drive past the liquor store, because I always tell them, like, especially when they first get out of treatment, like, it's inevitable. You're going to have thoughts. But just because you have thoughts, it doesn't mean you have to act on them. So I give them like levels. It's thoughts, cravings, obsessions, and relapse. And I always tell them, when you have the thoughts, that's when you still have some control. You need to do something at that level of having thoughts, whether it's you coming to therapy or calling your therapist and getting a session on the books, or something, but you need to do something at that thought level, because if it moves down to cravings, you definitely need to be calling your sponsor, you need to go to a meeting, you need to be reading literature, like you need to amp it up, because if it goes past cravings to obsessions, you're going to relapse.
You're done.
Yes, you're done. And I always tell them about the 5 Alive, the AM meditation, going to a meeting, calling your sponsor, calling someone else in the program, or reading literature, and PM meditation. I always tell them about that, because that gives them some sort of guideline of what they need to be doing at those different thoughts, cravings, obsessions, and relapse. You need to go back to treatment, but so that it can prevent them from getting to obsessions. Because I tell them, once if they get to obsessions, you lose your choice, because now you're already trying to figure it out. You've already relapsed here.
Yeah, addicted brain's taking back over control at that point.
Yeah, 5 Alive. That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, I learned it when I was working at a rehab.
And the pieces that both of you have highlighted, I think we live in such a day and age where this discussion around addiction, it gets watered down or it gets downplayed. But if you're struggling, truly, if you're watching this, if you got some time, subscribe to the channel so you can hear more about these things, but also just take care of you. Reach out to the professionals, go to a meeting. And I hope that resonates as we discuss this deeper tonight, that there is an astronomical percentage of people in the United States today who are affected by addiction, which extends to the family members, which are often, they're the last kind of conversation around addictions that occurs, just because they're not the ones using the substances. But, I can speak personally. It's like, as a family member affected, it made me pretty insane.
Right.
And us who've worked in treatment and work in therapy settings, we see that's the case, I think, across the board for all parties involved. I'm curious if you guys could put some words to that.
Anytime drugs or alcohol are involved, when you're hurting people around you, we always hurt the ones that we love the most, because that's the ones we expect their forgiveness. We expect their forgiveness, so it's like, oh, she won't mind if I have too many tonight, or if I run off and don't come home tonight, oh, she'll forgive me and let me back in the house. And we do that, and we take advantage of the love from our family members. But why do we do that, Why do we do that? The people we love the most, we're hurting the most, and one day you might be too far gone. You might burn that bridge for the last time. So addiction is one of the most selfish things on the planet. We care about our drug, we care about our drink more than anything else. It takes complete control over our lives, takes control over our family relationships, and that's who we end up hurting.
And I also want to extend that list: drugs, alcohol, intimate. I don't know if I can say that word, the other word on here, the intimate addictions. Yes.
Those good times.
Right. Grown up times. Gambling, it could be any type of addiction. Now, definitely understand that all of those affect families differently, but nevertheless, families are still impacted by the addiction. I think you said it very well when you mentioned that you hurt the family members the most because they're going to love you. It's almost like the individual addicted to something believes they're entitled to the love. Yeah. And the thing about it is, that's one of the things that I teach my family members, is to make sure whenever they start setting boundaries, to make sure that boundary is a boundary that they can follow through with. Because if they don't follow through with it, the person that's addicted to something, they got them. Like, oh, you love me too much to implement it. I got you. Yeah. I'm gonna run rings around you all the time now.
Yeah. Yeah, and It's that subtle unconscious manipulation that comes with, I think, powerlessness. All right, if we bring kind of that aspect that you both are touching on of like the grace around how much we're affected by this and how much our family members are, it's there are those subtle degrees of manipulation that occur and the subtle degrees of the lack of accountability that become increasingly more apparent. And really, it's like one of the best ways I've ever heard it put was, without support, this only gets worse. It never gets better.
But it's hard for the family members to continue to support when, like you were saying earlier, you keep doing it, and you keep doing it. Like, at some point, that forgiveness radar, that understanding radar is going to turn into frustration, mad, anger, until they're pissed off. And like, I don't want to have nothing else to do with you.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes that's the best family support we can give an addict is.
I just told somebody
I'm cutting
that.
you off.
Yep.
I'm cutting you off.
Yeah.
You want to do this. You want to keep hurting people. You want to keep ruining your own life. Then you ain't doing it to me. Sometimes that's the best love we can give an addict of any kind is just not enable them and back up and hold your ground. Don't let them manipulate you into something. Don't let them manipulate the situation into you being the enabler that they're looking for in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think family members get confused. That's the best word I can think of right now. Confused with the line between support and enabling, because it's a fine line. And they think that if they are not, enabling them, which they think is support, if they're not enabling them, then they're not supporting them. I just told someone, a family member, that same thing. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take your hands off of it. And what I try to do in my book, is give stages of boundaries, because everybody is not ready to just say, okay, I'm going to divorce him or her, or I'm going to put them out. Everybody's not at that point. So if you're not at that point, my goal is for you to set the boundaries where you're ready. I have to meet you where you are. So the boundaries that you're ready to set and ready to follow through, that's where we're going to start. And we're going to keep going up, and keep going up until whatever your end decision is going to be. If it's to leave, then it's to leave. But you have the courage to be able to do it. If it's to divorce, then you divorce. But you have the courage to be able to do it. Yeah. Because now you've taken the stages that you needed to do to practice setting those boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't set boundaries so hard on yourself that you'll never follow through with them.
Yeah.
I try to teach that to my clients is, people have given us more grace than we deserve in our addiction, but we got to give ourselves grace too when we're trying to get sober and not set such strict boundaries that we can't follow through with.
What do you think a strict boundary is?
A strict boundary?
Sorry. I
let's see. A strict boundary. I don't know if it's like a boundary where. Oh, you had to ask me that. We got to cut this part out.
Yeah, that's all good. We'll circle back to this one, but I think one of the premises I hear from what both of you are sharing around boundaries and the family members that are impacted by addiction is that love cannot exist long without the dimension of justice. And justice can mean a lot of little things, right? Justice can mean that you're being more honest with me about, the time that you're spending. All right, you tell me you're going to a meeting, and if I were to drive over there, you're actually at the meeting. And if I'm to drive over there, then I probably need a meeting too.
Because why are you driving over there?
Yeah,
Because
bingo.
let them have their life. And that's the other thing that I teach in my book too, is about a new normal. So can I give maybe an example of a
You
strict
got a
boundary?
strict boundary?
Maybe, I don't know. I
All
want.
right, let me see.
So is a strict boundary when the person addicted to something says, "I'm going to be completely honest with you about everything."
Yes.
Okay, because that's probably not true.
Right.
And then, they probably don't need to be, and not that they're keeping things from them, but some of that honesty needs to go to their sponsor.
Yeah.
And not the family member. Because what I try to teach my family members is to, whatever role you have in that person's life, the person that's addicted to something's life, we need you to get back in that role. So if you're the wife, I need you to be the wife, not the sponsor, not the therapist, not the attorney, not the secretary, the wife.
Right.
And so the other honesty stuff needs to go to the sponsor.
Go down the right path. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
would that be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like, I'm gonna make my 90 meetings in 90 days, which is a great thing to shoot for. But then somebody doesn't hit that, and like, oh, I done messed up. Let's just throw it all down the drain, Or we talk about setting a schedule. When you get out of treatment, have your day planned out so you don't have all this sitting around bored time where you're thinking about the past. And we all know what we used to do when we got bored. So, fill your time up, but don't do it so strict and so rigid that you're not giving yourself time to get from here to there, and then you're not giving yourself grace if you're late to something. So I think I was thinking along those lines too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to your point, I talk to my clients about creating a new normal, right? So when the person addicted to something comes out of treatment, they have created a new normal because usually they do the 5 Alive. They go to meetings, they have AM prayer, they read literature, they talk to a sponsor, they and do PM prayer or meditation, whatever one. So the family members have to also do the same thing. They have to, because one of the things that I get my family members to understand is when the person comes out of treatment, they're going to need to go to meetings of some sort. They're going to need to talk to their sponsor, and they don't need you saying, I thought you got out of your meeting at 6:00. It's 6:15. Why you not at home? I thought you said that you was going to come straight home. The kids said they needed to talk to you, so why you not home talking to them? Like, that is going to badger them. So leave them alone. And let them be in their treatment. So if you feel like you got to go down that line of treatment, you need to call your therapist and schedule an appointment. You need to go to Al-Anon. You need to have some self-help books, preferably Addiction Hurts Everyone. Right. So that you can start reading what you need to read to help you to get through that time of anxiety. Because the thing about it is, family members are going to still have that anxiety when they get out of treatment. When they say that they're going to a meeting, are they really going to a meeting? I don't believe they're going to a meeting. They're going to have those triggers, which is fine and normal for them,
Yeah. The unresolved resentments. Yeah.
Yes.
And which is going to naturally, right, lead to, the vicious cycle of expectations, which is going to make you anxious and more resentful, right? Because, until anybody in the family disease of addiction gets recovery, true recovery, and that can look like a lot of different things, which we can get into and has already been touched on tonight in different ways. Nothing changes, right? We know the old adage, nothing changes if nothing changes. And so, it really becomes apparent that once you've gone to treatment, you have to start taking action, right? And especially when you step out those doors. And we talked a little bit about that last time. If you got this nice environment, but once you step outside of that nice, quiet environment, the world hits.
Yeah, that's why you got to spend your time in treatment. At our facility, it's not just one way. We believe that there are many, many ways to recover. You got to find out what works best for you. If I just throw an AA book at you in the morning and say, hey, here, read this, I'll see you tonight. If you do that for 30 days, or NA, Refuge Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, whichever one. If I just force you to do something, but if you're not going to do it when you get home and continue practicing, then what are we doing? You got to pick up on something in your treatment facility that you're going to continue when you get out with your private practice, with your outpatient office, wherever you go.
Yeah, and then be gentle. You know, we're back and forth talking to each other and talking to the crowd today, but it's like you got to be gentle with yourself and with others. Because the big thing when I'm working with 12-steppers, right, because that's kind of my background and niche, is don't start beating everybody over the head with the good news. Right? Just stay focused on your program. Stay focused on your spiritual growth. Stay focused on your sobriety. And the same is true for the family members, because that's probably the bulk that I work with as well. That's why you and I have clicked so well, is stay out of their business. All right? You got no business in their business. That's another adult. And it comes back to dignity, right? Showing each other the dignity. And if we're going to be involved in each other's life, that if there's not that justice of like letting you stand in your dignity while I stand in mine, well, that causes conflict and problems. And we just know when we stay out of those realms of confronting each other in those ways of like, well, why'd you do it this way? All right. Things are much calmer, and people are much more willing to open up and talk to you when that's the case too.
Well, and I think that's one of the things the family members have to understand is that when the person that's addicted to something go to treatment, they get 7, 14, 21, 28, 30 days, and I think now 60, maybe even 90 days of treatment. So when they come home, they have the mindset of being in recovery and being in therapy, and now they're able to use the jargon, but you don't as the family member. And so it's going to irritate them to death that they now can speak all this, oh, now that you done been to treatment, oh, you think you better than everybody. Well, I hope so. And if you go to treatment too, you would be right there on the same level. But that's the thing. A lot of times family members don't think that, excuse me, that it's impacted them the way it really has. And now instead of the person that was addicted to something using them as a punching bag, now you're using them as a punching bag. And that's not fair to either of you, because now what's going to happen is the toxic environment is still there.
Yeah.
One of the things I touched on in a group with my clients today was you're not as smart as you think you are. So even when you're in treatment for the average day is 30 days. Let's say even when you're in treatment for 30 days, when you get out, when you go home, everybody sitting around that table or sitting on that couch at home is thinking about everything you've done the last 10 years. They're not thinking about what you've been doing the last 30 days as much. It takes time to prove that out, and you can't just talk about it, but you got to walk it out in front of them, and that takes time to get their trust back and to get their respect back and everything like that. You just got to, when you're coming out of treatment, like you said, the family, they ain't been in treatment. Some of them might have been in Al-Anon, but most of them haven't. So you come back home and you remember, hey, I'm back home. I'm not with a group of recovering addicts anymore. I'm back in the dogfight. So you just come out and you gotta get in your toolbox. You gotta use your coping skills. You gotta keep seeing your therapist. Go to your outpatient meetings. Go to your AA meetings. Whatever you're doing. But you gotta keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And they have to remember too that sometimes, a lot of times, the family members have memories that they don't have because they don't remember it, because they were inebriated, intoxicated, whatever the case may have been. And so they're going, and the point is not to prove that they didn't do it or that they did do it. The point is that that's the perception that the family member still has. And you can't prove that it's not wrong because you don't have the memory, and I think family members also have to get used to, and that's one of the things I tell my family members, don't try to confront them about past things that they did or did not do or said or did not say, because they probably don't remember it. And the only thing that's going to do is agitate you even more. So one, don't try to have a conversation with them while they're intoxicated or inebriated. Don't try to confront them about past things, even if it was yesterday. If they were intoxicated, they probably don't remember. So don't don't do it. Don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. The family member, especially progress into adulthood, right? It's the self-fulfilling prophecy of abandonment and neglect, right? And if that's your struggle and you found yourself, linked up with someone who is struggling with addiction, oftentimes that's the version of self-sabotage that the family member is dealing with that's been now entangled with the self-sabotage that the addict was wrapped up in. And so you guys are probably hearing us use some words tonight, and we'll clarify here just for a moment. We're talking about AA, we're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a 12-step program for those who are struggling with really any substance use. If you're not driving with Alcoholics Anonymous, there's Narcotics Anonymous if drugs are more your thing. Either one of those programs are going to really help you out. We've also mentioned Al-Anon tonight. Al-Anon is a program for family and friends affected by the family disease of alcoholism. If you know someone who struggles with substance use or any addiction for that matter, Al-Anon is full of people. They're the ones who are going to help you figure it out and help you take care of yourself. If there's anything you take from what the wonderful professionals are sharing here tonight, it's my hope that if you are struggling tonight, that you find those programs and that you find the treatment that you need. We know that if you're in the community here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we would recommend Hidden Oaks absolutely as a treatment center if you're struggling with substances. And if you're struggling with substances after treatment or you're a friend or a family, we recommend Balance Beacon. You are not alone. I'll shut up on that for a moment, but to get back into this, the family disease of addiction is isolation at its finest. And we were already touching on a little bit of that earlier, but isn't it interesting that we live in an age where we're so connected? We can do cool stuff like this, where all of a sudden, for some reason, this is just blasted out through the waves on the internet, and everybody's isolated to higher and higher degrees. And I'm sure you guys have perspectives on that, and just because I enjoy listening to both of you, I'd love to hear your guys' perspectives on just kind of the state of isolation and what's going on these days.
Well, I think for family members, they isolate because it's embarrassing. They don't want people to know that that's something that they're struggling with in their family. They don't, and, depending on the dynamics of their family, they may be trying to keep up an image of perfection, or, that they are the mess up of the family. It's a lot of reasons why family members stay in isolation and sometimes it's not that. They're isolated because the person that's addicted to something has set a boundary to not say anything about it. Why you telling my mom about what I did? Why you got to be talking about my business? And so they isolate. Yeah. They feel like they don't have anyone to turn to or talk to about what's going on, because it's going to become a bigger problem in their home.
Yeah.
Isolation, I think it comes from, with addicts and alcoholics, I think it comes from the shame and guilt that come from the wreck you've made of your life. Drugs, alcohol, they become your God when you're in the throes of addiction. You don't care about nothing else. I already said it tonight. It is all you are worried about. Yeah. So if I gotta sit at a hotel room by myself for 3 days just to binge out and get high, that's what an addict's gonna do, because they crave the high. They crave the drunken stupor more than anything else. And addicts don't want to hear, well, you can get better. If a person isn't ready to enter treatment or ready to get sober, ready to change their lives, we can talk to them all we want. But until they're at the point where they're ready to get sober and change their life, it's like talking to that doorknob over there.
Yeah.
So addicts isolate because they want to. They want to worship their drug.
And I always tell family members, the addict's addiction is to their addiction, but their addiction is to the addict. And so just like the addict has to go through withdrawals and separate and, things like that, so does the family member. And it's hard for them to let go of what they think they are controlling, because they're not controlling it, but they think they are. They have an illusion that they are.
Yeah. Yeah. The illusion all the way around, right? From top to bottom and bottom to top, right? The addict believes they're controlling that substance when that substance is God to them, which you had stated. And the family member thinks that they could do something in a different way, maybe, dress a little prettier or, cook a nicer meal, and they have no control. That person's going to do, like you said, you could talk to the doorknob. And it's so funny. It's the very first show I ever did here in the studio. I was talking about the family disease of addiction when we were over in the other studio, and we got a caller, and that was the conversation that we were having. And so we have a lot of individuals who watch this show week to week, and when these topics come up, I think it's so important that we're touching on this aspect of no one's going to change until they have decided for themselves, purely and only themselves, that they need and want to do better. And then we get into the phase of, any traditional conversation of recovery, which is we have to be willing to change everything.
Right.
Truly.
That's all you got to change is everything.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it's not a struggle that we would envy, right? But as human beings, we all have our afflictions. And I've been talking with a few people this week about this, especially when these things start to hit around the holidays, of everybody's struggling with something. But a true mark of mental health, all right, the big umbrella term we talk about is when you see someone who has a level of willingness to make the changes in their life when something isn't going right. Sometimes people can do that real quick. Other times they need, like you were saying earlier, they need time to do that. They need levels to build themselves up in their confidence. But the true marker, if you are wondering out there and following along, is to be able to position yourself to make those changes and for it to be observable by others without you having to go tell them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the evidence of that is you being in an environment that feels less chaotic. Because one of the things that both the person that's addicted to a substance and the family member get used to is chaos. And so now they have to weather the storm and not allow the chaos to be so missed that they try to drudge it up again. And because that chaos is what's going to keep both of them unhealthy. Or the need for the chaos.
Yeah. It's unconscious a lot of times, and that's what makes it tricky. Like, how do I get to the bottom of something that I was taught that I don't remember I was taught? It's like, well, I suppose it's a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, of just get real honest with yourself of whether or not you're in distress and where that distress is coming from and the ways that you're impacting other people. That's a good start. It's a real good start.
Well, self-sabotage, when people get out of treatment, everything's going good. Like you said, they're used to the chaos being around. Everything's going good. Oh no, let me get in a fight. Let me, the family's over for dinner. Let me throw something. Let me break something so I can get everybody riled up because everything's going too good. I've heard that from so many people. I've said it myself. Everything's going too good. Something's going to mess up at some point. So if I mess it up, at least I know it's coming and I won't be blindsided by it. Addicts and family members are so used to that chaos and turmoil all the time. A lot of times they self-implode just to do it themselves and not be blindsided.
Yeah, which brings us back to the cornerstone that every family member is afflicted with, which is the willfulness and the control. All right. If I'm afraid that things are going to go wrong and I tell myself, well, I might as well be the one to make it go wrong, I'm one step closer again to my insanity. All right. And the whole thing spiraling and the house of cards falling. And we know that this is the nature of addiction. Willfulness. I'm going to do this my way. It's like, well, let's run an experiment, try a new way. All right. I'll always get asked a question like, well, how long, should I be going to meetings? I don't know. Let's try at least as long as you tried the other way,
Yeah,
I love it.
Why not? You
That's
know?
a great answer.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you got one life. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I teach the wilderness survival course at Hidden Oaks. We start fires, learn how to start fires. We do fishing, purifying water, building shelters, all that type of stuff. And you know, sometimes it'll be raining or it'll be windy or it'll get cold out. And I'll have clients, oh, I don't know if I can make it out today, Dalton. It's like, oh, really? You can't make it out to therapy. Well, it didn't stop you from walking 2 miles in the rain when you was going to get your fix.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, kind of like you're saying, you got to put as much effort into recovery as you did into your other lifestyle. You got to be willing to do that, willing to change everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand why people, and that's just whether it's addiction or just mental health, why people don't put as much effort to be whole and to be healed as they do to being active in their addiction or active in their mental health diagnoses of, you know, whatever that may be, whether it's the symptoms of depression, the symptoms of anxiety. And granted, I know some people may say, well, I don't choose to, but are you choosing to be healthy? Are you choosing? Because a lot of times people, for depression, a lot of times people think that the opposite of depression is happiness, and it's not. It's behavior. You have to do something to help to decrease those symptoms. And we don't, and I think people just think it's just easier to just give in to the symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think people don't want to flip that switch just because it's harder, and it's not our first nature. You know, our first nature is selfishness. What can I do for me? You know, well, if I got to work on myself to be better for other people as well as myself, well, that really ain't for me.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you both have kind of touched on what's making me think of every behavior is a presentation for some unresolved pain. All right, and we can start to leverage that, right, so that our behaviors now are more associated with resolved pain, which inevitably, when you know it, is typically always associated with being of service to your fellow, right? The people in your community. And that's observable since the beginning of time. It's like every religious text talks about that, every spiritual philosopher talks about that, every recovery program talks about it. There's your cornerstone. It's like, you know, if I'm going to sabotage, it's most likely typically to do with unresolved problems I don't want to look at. And the paradox of that is exactly what you were saying. Like, well, what can I do for myself? Well, the best thing to do for yourself would be to sit in that pain, but that's going to take time, right? In order for you to even identify, call it by its right name, sit with it without trying to rush through it. And you may not know how to do that, but you do know how to get loaded, right? Or you do know how to beat up the alcoholic, and you know how to do it real good.
Yeah, that idea of sitting with your own pain is very, very uncomfortable. And for a lot of people, they don't even think of doing that because it's healthy. You know, that's the healthy thing to do. But that's not what goes in our mind. Our mind goes to the most unhealthy thing because a lot of times with addiction, they think that the thing that they're addicted to is the answer, and it's not. It's you dealing with those things that you haven't been dealing with: the pain, the emotions, the hurt, the trauma. That's what's the healthy. So you have created a unhealthy solution and think that's the gospel, and it's not.
Were you going to add anything to that?
I was just going to say one of our alumni at Hidden Oaks came up with this quote, or she might have got it from somebody else, but it was feel it, sit with it, let it go. Feel it, sit with it, and let it go. We don't know how much time is in between the feel it and the let it go part. That sit with it, that could be a minute. But unless we're going to, deal with what we got going on, for addicts and alcoholics, it's not the drug that's their problem. It's not the alcohol that's their problem. There's something driving that.
Yeah.
Let's get down to what's driving the bus and attack it at its root, and then we can find recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Had someone wise tell me a long time ago, they said the bottle's a symbol, all right? The drinking's a symptom, but the problem was always acting out. Mm. Right, and that's just listening to both sides of the coin as we're talking about the family members and the alcoholic, as we've gleaned information, and hopefully you guys have tonight. It's like acting out is always the problem. Our behaviors are always going to be where we find the answer to what we're trying to cram into the void. And we make no bones about it on this show, and I always, kind of share just from my perspective, and I have the right to do that because I'm the host, is, if you're trying to fill the void, you can't fill that God-shaped hole with anything other than God.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
However you identify it, you don't like the word God, that's fine. Use a different word for it. We support that as well. Your higher power, something spiritual, Mother Nature, whatever it is, all right? But there seems to be, in our mental health, when you get past the behaviors and into some of those deeper places we sit with, there seems to be that spiritual axiom, especially with recovery. I've always heard it in the discussions I've had with both of you respectively, read it in your book. There are these aspects where we just get into those deeper places where the only words we have at a certain point are spiritual to describe the experience.
Mm-hmm. That's where our problem is. Addiction, it affects you physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, all these places. But when you come back to the root of it, it's a spiritual problem, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get back to the root of it to really, we can patch up those other areas. We can patch up the relationships. We can patch up the physical, the mental, the emotional. But I believe when we get down to that spiritual aspect of it, and however you want to do that, whichever route you choose to go, but I think that's a route everybody has to go down at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. In whatever way makes sense to you and whatever way feels comfortable, but everybody's going to have to take that journey at some point, whether you're listening tonight and affected by the family disease of addiction or not, or you just don't know if you are. Mm-hmm. We're all going to face, especially in our society in the U.S., we're all going to face this discussion at some point with someone we love or know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Any last words that you guys want to share respectively just about this topic and that you think that our listeners would benefit from hearing from you guys?
I would say that we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Come on.
And we are made in God's image. Everything that we have everything we need to heal, to work through the things that we have to work through, we have on the inside of us. We just have to tap into it. We just have to go to God or your higher power and ask for the strength to be able to do it. Ask for the courage to be able to do it, because we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely.
One of the things that's been on my mind lately, I just asked my oldest daughter to make me a shirt the other day that says this on it, and I put it on the wall out there, is work hard and trust God. I touched on that a little bit last time I was in here with you. You gotta work hard, whatever you're doing in life, addict or not, life ain't easy, and there's so many more people affected by addiction than we know. Mm-hmm. There's so many people who do it isolated, and they believe nobody else knows about it. And some people, they can keep it that way for a good long while, be a closet drinker or whatever the case is. But addiction affects so many people in our world. And if you find yourself in addiction, or you're a family member of an addict, it's going to be hard work to come through to recovery. It's going to be hard work to get to sobriety. But we do all we can. We have to work hard, and we have to trust God. We have to trust our higher power to do the rest.
Yeah,
we just do what we can.
Yeah. Well said. I want to thank both of you for coming on again tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, Dalton Blazek, the Wilderness Director and Experiential Director and Pastor over at Hidden Oaks, and Dr. LaFonya Jones-Hines, LPC, co-owner, right, of Balance Beacon. This won't be the last time you see these two. They will be returning for a panel discussion in front of a live audience on December 11th, where we'll be discussing, again, the family disease of addiction and paths to recovery. We'll be deepening the conversation a little bit more on Wednesday, December 11th. Ladies and gentlemen, we break the cycle here every Friday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will see you next week. God bless.